Good evening. Let's have a word of prayer as we get started. Although that last song felt a lot like prayer to me, let's do it again. Lord, it is with grateful hearts that we are gathered tonight, expecting your Spirit to lead. Thank you for the blessing of singing together, for the fact that that just encourages our spirit and brings us closer to you. As we spend a little time in your word tonight, I pray that you would be the translator of all things said, and that you would open your word to us as you opened it up to Moses. In Jesus' name, amen. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 15 tonight. We're taking a stab at Jesus is the exact image of God in human flesh. And if you were paying close attention to John chapter 1, John just simply is stating that the person interacting in the Old Testament with Israel, it's Jesus. The person interacting in the creation, it's Jesus. Jesus was always the one interacting with humankind, so why would we expect a different heart? This is a passage that I'm real excited about sharing with you. This is one I would preach every week in my church if I could get away with it. In fact, I might try that a couple of weeks. Just preach it twice and see if anybody notices. 72 hours, I'm not going to remember anything, right? So, but this is see if you know where I'm going. Daryl, you should have heard this before, maybe twice. This is a passage that began, to me it has an interesting story, because I went to my Old Testament theology class, okay? Now, Old Testament theology is not one of those places you expect a great deal of inspiration, okay? I don't know if if it sounds like it should to you, but I wasn't expecting a great deal of inspiration. My professor, I loved him. He was a man of God, a man with a heart of God, just a great guy. He had great insights into the Old Testament. But he had told us what the topic was. It was published in our, what's that thing called? Syllabus, thank you. Published in our syllabus, and you look in the syllabus, and this Tuesday, we are talking about Hittite suzerainty treaties. Everybody, a round of applause. Yeah, that's how we felt. It's like, yeah, great, Hittite suzerainty treaties. That sounds like a barrel of laughs. But it's amazing. So he gets in and he starts talking to us about Hittite suzerainty treaties. Now, the Hittites were a group of people who have inhabited Canaan at certain times, and as inhabitants of Canaan, they were actually a fairly powerful group, and they were coming in. What do you call it? The only phrase that comes to mind is not one I should share with you. They were taking names. They were serious about this. They came in, they whipped people, they made them their servants. They were just very powerful, mean, really kind of folks. But they had this way of making a treaty. And this treaty was a vassal and a suzerain, okay? The two names you have to know, a vassal and a suzerain. The vassal is the one who is the servant they're the one who lost the battle, okay? And the suzerain is the boss, the one who won the battle, okay? So they would conquer a little village or a nation, and they would make them vassals. They would become vassal states. They would have to pay a certain payment every year or whatever. So there was always some payment to go along with having lost, okay? So this was the big explanation. We started out the class with, oh yeah, we're learning about the Hittites and their treaties, and this is exciting stuff. And it's around the time of Abraham, okay? So as we start tonight, I want you to keep track of that idea. The Hittite suzerainty treaty is a treaty between the Hittites, who were usually the winners, and somebody they defeated, okay? And this treaty had some very specific and explicit things in it. Genesis chapter 15, verse 1. If you have a Bible with you, it's that we're going to be just going right through Genesis chapter 15. Genesis chapter 15, beginning in verse 1, says, "After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, 'Fear not, Abram, I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward.'" Now, wouldn't you like God to call you and tell you that? God calls you up one night and says, "Hey, don't worry, I am your shield and your very great reward." Would that be enough for you? It wasn't enough for Abram. This is verse 2. "But Abram replied, 'O sovereign Lord, what good are all your blessings when I don't even have a son?'" So this is kind of the interesting response, isn't it? Abram, great, you're my shield, then that's cool, and you're giving me great blessings, but I don't have a son. I am getting older, and I have no son. I don't even have a son. Since you've given me no children, Eliezer of Damascus, a servant in my household will inherit all of my wealth. So you can bless me all you want, and it will not be passed down to my children. What's Abram worried about? He's getting old, still no kid. He has no legacy. He has no lineage, right? Right? He's worried about what's going on with that. The Lord said to him, no, your servant will not be your heir, for you will have a son of your own who will be your heir. Okay? Now, is this the first time Abram's heard this? No, God's been telling him this for a while. God's been telling him this over and over, and Abram keeps having this, okay, Lord, okay, Lord, okay, Lord. Now we're in verse 4. Now we go down to verse 4. Verse 5. The Lord took Abram outside and said to him, look up into the sky. So now God is making this practical, right? He says, all right, Abram, come outside. So Abram wakes up apparently, because remember he was at night, he was asleep. Apparently he wakes up, goes outside, and he goes outside and he says, look up at the sky and count the stars. If you can, that's how many descendants you will have. So if you don't believe me, I'll take you outside and give you a practical illustration. Look up. That's how many descendants you will have. Okay? Innumerable descendants. Are Abram's descendants still around? Yes, they are. The Jewish people are still around. They have re-inhabited Israel. I was listening today to, I have a little Bible on my phone, and I was walking this morning. I was listening to it, and I didn't realize I'd done it, but I apparently had it on random play. So I started listening in 1 Corinthians, and then I jumped to Nehemiah, and so I decided, hey, why not? So I was all over the Bible this morning. I was walking for about an hour, so everything from the one that really freaks you out in the middle of you're listening to something from Isaiah or Corinthians, and then all of a sudden Song of Solomon comes on. It's like, ooh, okay, that's a little shock to the system, you know? But it was just really interesting, and I was listening to many of the statements of God about the people of Israel being called back to the land, being called back to the land, being called back to the land. And I think you should all ask Gary to do a series next year on what it means for Israel to be called back to the land, and does it relate to the current people in Israel, okay? Okay, make sure he answers that completely next year in his seminar. And somebody send me a copy, okay? All right? So he says, you are going to have innumerable children, and we all know, looking back on it, that was true. But for Abram, all he knows is he's getting old. His wife is getting old. She's not been able to have children up to this point. And now Abram and his wife are starting to get past the time when you think about having children. You talk about aging, wisely, carefully, and integratedly. You start having kids at 90. That'll integrate you into something. Into the nut house, I think is what that'd integrate me. They would have to take me away. I'm 50. If I start having kids now, they might have to take me away. My grandmother had a last child at 45. He was my uncle. We were born 4 days apart. I'm older. My grandmother went into the hospital on my birthday, false labor after 9 children. Just proves experience isn't everything it's cracked up to be. Okay? So Abraham is taken outside, points up at the sky. Look at the stars in the sky. You're going to have kids like that. Then this famous verse. This is the one Paul grasps out of this chapter, pulls it up into the New Testament, and he explains righteousness by faith with this verse. This is the verse that he hangs righteousness by faith on. And he says, Abraham believed the Lord, and the Lord counted it to him as righteousness. So is it righteousness? Yes, it is counted by God as righteousness. Was he righteous? No. In fact, Paul argues all sorts of things from this place. He says Abram wasn't yet circumcised, so circumcision certainly didn't make him righteous. He's not even called Abraham yet, so that change of name hadn't happened, so that wasn't a part of the covenant yet for him. So this is early on, and God is saying, your belief, your trust in me that you will have a son, I'm accounting that to you as righteousness. And the Apostle Paul helps us understand that in this process of growing in grace, growing in our nature toward God, walking with Jesus, it's God's accounting of our righteousness that matters, not our activity. I don't know if you've been following the seminars being done about. Well, it's family life seminars, right, that you're doing. You can't be doing it because you're here listening to Gary. There's a conflict. The family life seminars, you were talking today about, positional grace. positional grace. That what matters is what God thinks about you and his decisions about your righteousness. And that's what this is. This is God's description of Abram. Abram, you're righteous. He believed God. That faith, that trust. Now I want you to back up to what happened in the garden. Remember what happens in the garden? Adam and Eve break trust. Abraham now comes down. Abram, he's still not Abraham yet, comes down. And he gets to this moment when he says, will you believe me? He's standing out there looking up the sky, and he says, yeah, I believe it. That is so cool. And God says, I count that as righteousness because you trust me, because you believe in me, because you have given yourself over to me, and we'll walk this together. We'll walk this together. Okay? So you got it so far? Good. Okay. So this is what happens next. So he's just been accounted righteousness for his faith, right? For believing in God. Then the Lord told him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldees to give you this land as your possession. God is identifying himself as the God who has been leading him all along. Verse 8, but Abram replied, O sovereign Lord, how can I be sure that I will actually possess it? Does this sound like belief and faith to you? He's been accounted righteous by his previous faith in God, and then he goes right back to, but God, you ever done that to God? Is it okay? Does he throw you out of the house for having a but God moment? No, that's the deal. That's the deal. When you come to him and you trust him and you begin this walk with him, it's not in and out and in and out and in and out. You know how you get out of your relationship with God? Do you know how you get out of your relationship with God? You leave. You leave. And then, as Spurgeon says, he will pursue you like a bloodhound. He will keep after you and keep after you and keep after you till you take your last breath. God doesn't give up on his children because they're being ignorant any more than you or I would give up on ours because they're misbehaving. Right? You don't stop praying for your kid just because they're stupid. In fact, you pray more. Right? God doesn't stop pursuing us just because we're behaving badly. He pursues us more readily, more heartily. Okay? All right? Then the Lord told him, bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. Now, this is a very interesting set of animals, right? He just said, bring me some animals and just get them out here. A 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. Okay? So here's Abraham. What time of day is he having this experience with God? Nighttime. So I think God gives Abram a chance to go out and collect the animals. So he's got to go out to the herds, find a perfect 3-year-old goat, a perfect 3-year-old heifer, a perfect 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a pigeon. Now I think the first 3 are probably in the herd. Getting the turtle dove and the pigeon might not be as easy. Okay? So we know that he spends a lot of time at this because by the time we get in the middle of this, it's getting dark again. Okay? So he spends the day sort of gathering these things and getting ready for this. Now, at this point, Abram knows what he's about to do. Abram knows that he's about to sign a contract. You know how he knows? Because he knows about Hittite suzerainty treaties. See, this is a common experience around Canaan during this period. This is the preparation for signing a contract with the Hittites. He is about to sign a contract with God, and he knows who's the vassal and who's the suzerain. Who do you think is the vassal in this relationship? Abram is, right? The vassal, by the way, is the one responsible for bringing the animals. So what position is Abraham being told he's in by God? The slave, the vassal. He's being told he's the one signing the contract. He tells him, so Abraham presented all these animals to him. He killed them. So how does he know he's supposed to kill them? Did God say to kill them? Nope, but Abraham knows what he's doing. He knows he's signing a contract. So he kills the animals, then he cut each animal down the middle. Now, I'm not sure if he cut it this way or this way. I would go this way because it'd be a lot easier. I don't know which way you're supposed to do it, but he cut them in half. And the way this works, the way the Hittites did this, is they would cut the animals in half, and they would lay each half along a path. So you'd have half a goat and half a goat, right? And half a heifer and half a heifer, and half a ram and half a ram. And then he didn't kill the birds. Didn't cut the birds. I guess that would just be overkill. I know, it's a bad pun, but you get it. So what they're doing is they're making a path, a bloody path with these half animals, right? Okay? And here's the deal. Here's what was supposed to happen. Here's what Abram knows he's supposed to do, right? The Hittites would take these vassal kings that they had just captured and conquered. They would take these vassal kings and they would make the king walk through the dead animals, okay? They had just made an agreement. You're going to pay us, a million shekels a year or whatever, okay? And they would make them walk through these dead animals who are split in half and bleeding out on the ground, okay? And they would have to repeat so everyone listening to the contract could hear, let it be done to me as was done to these animals if I should break my contract with the Hittites. And they'd have to just walk back and forth and repeat that statement. Let it be done to me as was done to these animals if I should break my contract with the Hittites. Abram knows what he's about to do. He's split the animals in half, and he knows what he's going to have to do next. He's going to have to stand before God and the universe and march back and forth saying, let it be done to me as was done to these animals if I should break my covenant with God. Okay? Abraham knows the score. Okay? You with me so far? I want to make sure you're picking up the pieces here because you got to have these pieces for the end. So the vultures swoop down. So do vultures fly at night? So now we know it's daytime, right? So the vultures swoop down and try to eat the carcasses, but Abram chases them away. So Abram has these carcasses sitting out there, and he's waiting for the suzerain to show up. Because you can't sign the contract without the boss, okay? He's waiting for God to show up, so he's chasing the buzzards away, and boy, we could just go off on a whole bunch of preaching points here about chasing the buzzards away from your offering. But I'm just going to let you marinate on that one tonight, okay? We don't have, there's some things to be said. Just take that one home with you and think about what it means to chase the buzzards away from your offering. The buzzards always come when there's an offering laid out. They always come when there's an offering laid out. So Abraham chases away the buzzards as the sun was going down. So Abraham has collected, killed, split these animals in half, chased away the buzzards, and now it's starting to get dark. The sun is starting to go down. As the sun was going down, Abraham fell into a deep sleep, and a terrifying darkness came over him. Why is Abraham falling asleep and stressed? He's probably grinding his teeth as he's trying to sleep, right? What's so stressful? Let it be done to me as was done to these animals if I should break my covenant with the Lord. How's he doing with the covenant so far? God said, you're going to have children like the stars in the sky, and Abraham believed, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. And his next phrase, but God, how will I know if I'm going to actually receive this land? Right? How's he doing with the covenant so far? Not so good. So if you were walking between a bunch of animals that had been sawn asunder, and you had to announce to God, let it be done to me as is done to these animals, if I should break my covenant with the Lord, wouldn't you be a little worried? So Abraham is a little worried as he goes to sleep. This darkness comes over him. This fear comes over him as he's falling asleep because he understands this treaty. This is a current thing for him. If somebody said to you, we're going to the notary office, would you know what they were talking about? Right? When God says to him, get these animals and bring them out here, he knows what God is up to. He knows he's signing a contract. He knows God is the suzerain, and he is the vassal. He knows his part is, let it be done to me as was done to these animals if I should break my covenant with God, which I just broke before I started. The Lord said to Abraham, so he's fallen into this sleep. He's stressed about what's going on. The Lord said to Abraham, you can be sure that your descendants will be strangers in a foreign land, where they will be oppressed as slaves for 400 years. So Abraham is already kind of worried. He's already a little stressed out about this contract he's got to sign. And God's message to him as the sun goes down and Abram's falling asleep again, second night, new message. Your family is going to be slaves for 400 years. Yeah. Now sign the contract. Right? What's he telling him about? He's telling him about Egypt. But I will punish the nation that enslaves them, and in the end, they will come out with great wealth. It's going to go bad. It's going to be bad for 400 years. If God said to you, your family is going to be in slavery for 400 years, would you be like, oh, okay, so as long as they come out wealthy. Right? This to me would be hard news to swallow. Your family's going to be enslaved for 400 years, but it's going to be good in the end. Yeah, but generations up, but it'll be good in the end. Take the bright side of this. Glass half full, Abram, come on. As for you, you will die in peace and be buried at a ripe old age. Well, Abram's already pretty ripe. And he still has no heir. He still has no land. And all he knows right now is that his children are going off to be slaves for 400 years. How would you like the terms of the contract so far? Let it be done to me as was done to these animals if I don't keep my covenant with the Lord. Are you wanting to bail on the contract? Too late. You lost the war. You have to sign. You are the vassal. God is the king. You have to do what God says. After 4 generations, your descendants will return here to this land. And listen to this. He finally answers why you don't get the land yet, Abram. He finally, after Abram being in this land for years now, he finally answers why you're not getting the land right now. Why you're a stranger in your own land. He says to him, the sins of the Amorites do not yet warrant their destruction. You know what this is? This is God saying, I'm still working with the Amorites. I still have my mercy and my grace over the Amorites. I still am extending grace to them, and I'm waiting. I'm trying to win them back. I'm trying to win them over. The sins of the Amorites do not yet warrant me throwing them out of the land. That's why you're not getting the land yet, Abram. Some of us pray to God and we ask for things, and what God's answer is this. He says, I know what you're asking for, but the circumstances aren't right yet. The circumstances aren't right yet. That's what he's saying to Abraham. He's saying, I am still extending grace to someone else. And while I'm still extending grace to them, I don't want to chase them out of the land. It's not time yet. It's not time yet. It's not going to be time for over 400 years, by the way. Is this a patient God? Yeah, absolutely. Here's where the story gets cool to me. This is Genesis 15. That's verse 17. After the sun went down. So it was sunset, God's talking to him, and now the sun goes down, so it's dark. After the sun went down, darkness fell. Abram saw a smoking fire pot. Now you get the picture? Why the picture is the picture? Okay. Abram saw a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch pass between the halves of the animals' carcasses. Ellen White adds a picture that as they go by, the animals are consumed. So here's the image I get. God, this smoking pot and this flaming torch go by, and the goat goes, and the cow goes, and the ram goes, and the little doves go. This smoking pot moves between the animals. Got it? You know why my professor was weeping by the end of the class? Because Abram did not walk between the animals. The only thing Abram does is chase away the vultures. Who's walking between the animals? Jesus is. What's he saying? Let it be done to me as was done to these animals. if I should break my covenant with Abram. When the covenant was broken by Abram's family, who took the punishment? He was the substitute for the sinner whose contract they could not even keep. See, God knows that Abram is incapable of keeping the covenant perfectly. He knows that he is going to mess this covenant up. He's going to miss a payment or 2 or 25 or 170. And he knows that the punishment that Abram deserves, the wages of sin, is death. And instead of letting Abram suffer the punishment, Abram watches as God moves between the animals and he says, let it be done to me as was done to these animals if I should break my covenant with Abram. Now, lest you think this covenant was only with Abram, Paul took verse 6 and he applied it to you and me. He said, the believing in God was Abraham's part in the covenant, and it is our part in the covenant too. It wasn't just Abram sitting out there in the dark with those animals. All of us were there with Abraham by faith. All of us are signers of this contract. All of us are present, and all of us are benefiting from the words and that God is stating that night. Let it be done to me as was done to these animals if I should break my covenant with Walt. Jesus is the exact image of God in human flesh. The plan of salvation was laid down before the foundation of the world. God is speaking to Abraham in a contractual language that he understands. If somebody hands you a piece of paper with a line on it and a blue pen, you know what your job is. When Abram starts cutting up animals, starts running the butcher shop out there in the desert, he knows what the role is. He knows he's supposed to be, when God tells him, walk through the animals saying, let it be done to me as was done to these animals if I should break my covenant with God. And there, as he is there out on the plain, this smoking pot and this firing torch show up and they move between the animals. And God says to Abram, let it be done to me as was done to these animals if I should break my covenant with you, and with you, and with you. The Old Testament is not a story, or it's not a tale of a mean and bloody God. This is not God saying, oh, I got to have some blood in order to sign a covenant. This is God saying, this is what these people understand about covenants. This is what these people understand about contracts. So let's talk to them in a way that they understand. Abram, go get some animals, cut them in half, lay them out there on the ground. And Abram knows he's supposed to be the signer. And then God's the one who signs. It's going to be 1,500 years. It's going to be 1,800 years from the signing of that covenant to the cross. But what happened on the cross was God holding up his end of the deal. The covenant was broken. It wasn't broken by him, but he chose to change the word of the covenant. You see, what God actually says as he walks through this set of animals, what he actually is saying for generations and generations and generations to come, captured by sin, lost and broken in the covenant, what he's actually saying is, let it be done to me as was done to these animals if Abram breaks the covenant. Let it be done to me as was done to these animals if my followers break the covenant. And 1,800 years later, he doesn't get hung on a cross. You are mistaken if you think Jesus was hung on the cross by some Roman soldiers. Jesus mounted the cross. He wasn't mounted to it. He mounted the cross. At any moment, he could have done away with everybody present. Nails are not holding Jesus to the cross. Jesus climbed up on the cross and fulfilled the bargain he made with Abraham and every single one of us before the foundation of the world. He said, if these people mess this up, I got them. If these people don't understand how to follow me, I got them. I have a sacrifice big enough to cover every sin that ever happens on this planet. I got this and I got you. You see, Abraham is out there on the desert that night saying, Lord, I need a son. Lord, I need to know that this land is going to be mine. And God says, no, you don't. You need a Savior. We're always wandering around thinking we need to do this and we need that and we need this and we need that. And we think that those things are going to satisfy us. And the reality is we don't need anything but Jesus. You know, if I live a life impoverished and imprisoned for the rest of my life, I wouldn't choose it. And I get heaven anyway, it's not such a bad deal. You know, I used to be really afraid that at the end of time I might get killed. Then I got really thoughtful one day about what happens after that. It's like, that's the worst they could do? The next thing I see is Jesus? Oh, that's not so bad. It might hurt, but the lights go out. When the lights go out, I see Jesus. You see, Abram thought he needed a son. God says, I understand. I got this covered, Abram. I got you. Abram believed God. Abram thought he needed the land. And God said, I'll give you the land. About 500 years from now, you can have it. And God said, what you really need is me. Let it be done to me as was done to these enemies. If you break the covenant. Hittite suzerainty treaties. Aren't they cool? What I want you to understand about this passage and understand from this tonight is simply that the grace of God, the mercy of God, the activity of God in salvation is everywhere in the Bible. It's not a New Testament thing. It's an everywhere thing. In the case of Ahaz that Pastor Gary's been sharing about in Isaiah, he starts Ahaz out with an opportunity for grace. He says, dude, ask me for anything, I'll prove to you that I'm God. Ahaz rejects him, and he rejects him to his absolute turmoil and his demise. But the grace was there, and it was offered. When we started the first night, we talked about Hosea, and he's got the people of Israel, the northern 10 tribes. They've been chasing after the Baals and Asherahs for years, for generations, and God finally says, look, you guys keep pretending that all your blessings are coming from things that are just wood and rocks. I'm sorry, but I'm taking you out of the land, the promised land. You're going to lose it. I'm taking you away from the priesthood, those people who speak to you about me. I'm taking you away from the temples. By the way, I didn't really want you to make 2 extra temples. And I'm taking you away into a foreign land. Hosea chapter 3. Then when you no longer have the priest, you no longer have the temple, you no longer have the land, then when all those things I've given you to connect with you are gone, you'll come to me because you have nothing else. Israel stood at the foot of Mount Sinai, remember? God is coming down and he's speaking and the mountain is shaking and smoke is coming out of it. And I suppose the voice was not really kind of a little squeaky one. You know, I think there was some thunder and lightning in this voice. I think God was a bass player in this situation and a lot of voices coming out there. And it's such a big voice that the people are petrified. God speaks the law to the people. But the deal is this. Nobody touches the mountain while God is talking. It's the rule. There's a fence around it. Don't touch it. If you touch it, you'll die. But when the trumpet blows, come up the mountain. Did you realize Israel was invited into a personal relationship with God at the foot of Mount Sinai? Absolutely. There was not to be anything between them. Personal relationship. Temples, priests, all that other stuff was explanatory. Relationship, personal. So when you hear the trumpet blow, come up the mountain. God speaks. Mountain shakes. Fire out of the mountain. Pretty wild, pretty amazing. Pretty scary. And when the trumpet blows, the Bible says Moses moved toward the mountain, and the people fled. They were invited into a relationship with God personally. And God was too big. God was too beyond for them to grasp, apparently. And they fled. And they said to Moses, we can't hear the voice of God anymore, or we'll die. Can you imagine if they had, if that were the relationship, if they got to actually hear the voice of God, and that was supposed to be our relationship, and they blew it for us? Don't let us hear the voice of God anymore, Moses, or we'll die. You talk to him and tell us what he said. The relationship has always been intended to be personal. You ever heard anybody say there are no second-generation Christians? There aren't. You can't get in on moms and dads' good behavior. It's a relationship that's personal. So here's God, sitting out in your backyard, and you got a veggie heifer out there, little veggie goat, and a veggie ram, which I'm assuming is a sheep, a veggie turtle dove, and a veggie pigeon, which I think, pigeon's just like a flying rat. I'm not sure why we ate those. And God comes into your personal backyard. And he says, okay, guys, we're going to sign a contract tonight. Are you in? And all of us have the same reaction that Abraham had. What are you going to want from me? What are you going to ask me to do? We fear God because we're afraid God is going to ask us to do something we don't want to do. And God says, all I want from you is that you trust me. And then he walks between your veggie burgers and he says, let it be done to me, as was done to these animals, if you break our covenant. It's personal, folks. It's yours and it's mine. He's trying to get us into heaven. He's for us. Let's pray. Father God, we, like Abraham, can hardly keep the covenant for one verse. Thank you that trusting you is accounted to us as righteousness. Thank you that you are the one in charge of our transformation. Thank you that you are the one who became sin for us, so that we who have sinned might be as if we had never sinned. Thank you that you took the hard side of this contract for me. Tonight, Lord, we praise you that you are trying to get us in. We thank you that you are trying to build a relationship with us where we fall in love and continue to trust and continue to grow and maybe even start to look like our Father. Tonight, once again, we join you in the contract. Thank you for making our part so easy. In Jesus' name, amen.